we don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bob Schieffer. Well, it was primary night in the Lone Star State of Texas. Governor Rick Perry, as expected, won the Republican nomination with a crushing victory over Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, and a Tea Party candidate and former Houston Mayor Bill White swept his opponents in the Democratic primary. One of the winners last night was Congressman Ron Paul, also fresh off a landslide victory, but he hasn't let his campaign get in the way of making headlines on the national scene. From his CPAC straw poll victory to his allegations against the Federal Reserve. We're going to take a look at one of the big races also in this year's midterm elections. You can call California's Senate race the Wild West Showdown, as an inter-party battle is heating up there between the Republican candidates. We'll talk to one of them, the front-runner at this point, Tom Campbell. But first, let's go to Capitol Hill, where Congressman Ron Paul is standing by. Well, it's been a big couple of weeks for you, Congressman. Here 2 or 3 weeks ago, you were chosen by CPAC as their candidate for president. Now you won re-election to your congressional seat. I guess a lot of people are wondering, are you going to make another run for the presidency in 2012?
Well, whenever that's decided, I'm going to tell myself, I have no idea. I don't have any plans for it. It's still, as far as I'm concerned, a long way off. Lots of things can happen from day to day, so I haven't made any decision. All
right, let me just ask you about the situation in Texas. If I'm correct, all of the Republican candidates who were running last night for Congress who had Tea Party candidates, all of the incumbents prevailed. I think there was one runoff where there is a Tea Party candidate still in the race. All this, you had a Tea Party candidate. All this talk we've been hearing about the Tea Party candidates, it didn't seem to bear much fruit last night.
Well, I think that the incumbents do have an advantage over any challenger, and yet I don't think it diminishes the fact that a lot of people are very upset, and they're upset with Republicans and Democrats. I think the old saying that they can get pretty upset with Congress, but they still like their congressman because, they get to know that individual. But I think it's going to be hard to root out a lot of incumbents, but there'll be more this year than usual.
You had a Tea Party candidate in your primary. I guess I would ask you, how can someone as conservative as you are, unabashedly conservative, how could you get somebody who thought you weren't conservative enough?
Well, I think they thought maybe because of the environment that they're going to throw out all the incumbents and they would just see if they could get a free ride. But politics requires a little bit more than that. You have to be organized, you have to have supporters, you have to have campaign, and you do have to have some money to do it. So it's not as simple as just being upset.
Congressman, I want to ask you about a recent hearing that you took part in. The Financial Services Committee had the Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke come before them, and you asked a question that had to do with, had the federal government, if I understand this correctly, funneled money through the Federal Reserve to the Watergate burglars and also to Saddam Hussein. Chairman Bernanke seemed taken back by that question. What basis did you have for asking that question?
Well, my real purpose was, if it's true, and there's a lot of people who think it's true, that it gives you a good reason to audit the Federal Reserve. It was still back to transparency issue. But recently, Robert Arbach, who worked for the Fed and worked for Henry Gonzalez, was very much involved in these investigations, and he felt like the Federal Reserve always rolled him and didn't give him the information that they've asked for. But, it wasn't something like it was brand new. If anybody goes to the internet now, and a lot of my supporters did this after that question, and after Bernanke became outraged, this is the most bizarre thing he's ever heard. Then all of a sudden, you go and look at the news, it's all over the place. It was back in there. There was discussion. I do remember the discussion, but this book, The Deception at the Fed by Arbach, really goes into details and shows what was going on at the time and what the Fed actually did to prevent the people from getting this information.
But Congressman, I mean, in all fairness, one can go to the internet and find anything one wants to find there. There's no guarantee that it's true or even bears any resemblance to the truth, some of it.
Okay.
But do you have any basis to believe that the Fed somehow funneled money to the Watergate burglars? I mean, what would be the basis of that?
Well, they facilitated it. It just goes to show that it's a very political organization, and if
who facilitated it, and
well,
how much?
I mean, if you have a president like Nixon who wanted to cover up, and he had to get the money, and somebody could do it, why wouldn't they be able to do this? But it was in the news. It wasn't like it was some sinister plot or somebody having with a wild conspiracy. It was average news back then, news reports. But really, the individual that has the most credibility on this is Arbach. He was involved in this discussion, and he was involved in going to the Fed to get this information along with Gonzalez and other Fed chairmen to try to get transparency of the Fed.
But you're not saying they found anything.
No, they denied to get the information. And this was my whole point with Bernanke. I says, I'm not making an accusation, but isn't it to our advantage, the Congress, the Federal Reserve, and the people, to allow us to know what's going on so that you can settle these arguments once and for all? And that was my point. It wasn't like, oh yes, why did you do this, and the Fed does this and that. I want the air to be cleared.
But don't you feel, I mean, is it in any way irresponsible to make an allegation like that?
No, I think it's irresponsible to ignore what the Fed does in secrecy. That's where their irresponsibility is, to allow things, if there's the slightest chance, why don't we clear the air on this? So I think the irresponsibility falls on the Congress for ignoring the Fed, no oversight. They literally create trillions of dollars. They pass it out through the discount window. They make deals with foreign banks, foreign central banks, and foreign governments. I mean, this to me is so irresponsible, and that's why we had our financial crisis, and that's why we're going to have a dollar crisis, is because we're derelict in our duties. The Congress pays no attention because, and I said this in the hearings, it's because Congress has a cozy relationship with the Fed. The Fed, if the Fed didn't exist, we couldn't run up these deficits. They would end because the Fed monetizes that debt. If you couldn't monetize debt, the Congress would be limited and they would balance their budget.
This will be our last question, but what you're saying is that what the Fed does, it does much of it in secret. You're not saying that you have any proof that they somehow funneled money to the Watergate burglars, or the other allegation you made that they funneled money to Saddam Hussein in any way.
I don't think that's a secret. Matter of fact, they explain it. That it came out of, the Treasury explained that it came out of a particular fund where they sold the oil and whatnot. But my point is, it wasn't appropriated by the Congress. No, that is no secret. I think that nobody's going to deny that $5.5 billion went to Saddam Hussein when we were his friends and his buddy. And of course, this fits my position that this is why we have such a disgusting foreign policy, because one time we're giving money to Saddam Hussein and we help him in his war against Iran, and then the next time we're fighting Saddam Hussein. One time we're a friend of Osama bin Laden, and then the next time we're his arch enemy. The insanity of our foreign policy is connected with our monetary policy, and the Federal Reserve facilitates it in several ways.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Congressman Paul.
Bob.
Always interesting, I would say, to get your point of view. Thank you so much. And as we continue our survey of the interesting races around the country, Tom Campbell was going to run for California's gubernatorial post, but he switched over to the Senate and is now the front runner in that race. This is the Senate seat now held by Democrat Barbara Boxer. Well, how has the former congressman been able to take the lead so quickly? He faces an uphill battle against opponents like Hewlett-Packard's CEO Carly Fiorina and a potential run against the incumbent Barbara Boxer, as we said. The race has turned very ugly, and his opponents have heavily criticized where he stands on taxes, the budget, even Israel. So we're going to get to all of that as we talk to Tom Campbell now. He's joining us from Los Angeles. Congressman, I remember the days when you were in Congress, and you've been around politics out in California for a long time. Why did you decide to suddenly switch and run for the Senate instead of running for governor?
There are two reasons. First, the federal issues became hugely important. I became a candidate for governor in June of 2008, and since then, just take one way of measuring that, the federal budget deficit's gone from just under $500 billion to over $1.6 trillion. The national health care debate, the cap and trade debate, the financial services, all of the federal issues have grown in major proportion. And also, quite candidly, it was impossible to raise the funds I needed when I was running against two very wealthy individuals in the Republican primary. One is a billionaire and the other more than half the way there. And by contrast, I have a background in the United States House of Representatives. I served for 9 years, so I know the federal issues and the importance of the federal issues on California, particularly on the employment issue in California, has eclipsed even the state issues. So I used the opportunity to continue in public service where I had the opportunity to serve in public service.
Let me ask you this. I mean, your opponents say you want to raise taxes, that you have a history of raising taxes. Is that your position, that the deficits being what they are, that there are going to have to be tax increases?
No, not at all. That's been pure attack from my Republican opponents. In fact, when I was a congressman, the National Taxpayers Union Foundation rated me the single most fiscally responsible member of Congress in both the 102nd and the 106th, and I never proposed a tax increase to solve the federal budget deficit at all. What they're trying to do, candidly, is take advantage of the fact that I was the finance director of the state of California in 2004 to 2005. Governor Schwarzenegger is not as popular as he once was, and dealing with the state budget involves taxes. And so that's what they're attempting to do.
Well, do you think that the deficit can be brought under control without some sort of a tax increase, Congressman? We're talking about the national.
I do. The federal deficit is huge. The president's budget has a $1.26 trillion deficit, and the current one is $1.6 trillion. And so I looked at the budget, the size of the federal budget, a $3.7 trillion budget, and I found that I could cut at least $700 billion. And so I proposed doing so, and you can see it on my website, campbell.org. Another way of looking at it is the state of California is 1/7 the population of the United States, but the federal budget is 40 times the size of the budget of California. So the problem of spending on the federal side is the origin of the budget deficit, and the importance of that, I really must tie this in because this is what voters telling me, is the job situation. People will not hire. Employers with jobs are holding back because they're uncertain due to the size of the federal budget deficit. What size inflation are we going to have? What kind of borrowing are we going to have? What effect on interest rates? At some point, Ben Bernanke's got to raise interest rates because of the size of the federal government, the deficit in particular. And so all of those cause tremendous uncertainty and hold back spending, so hold back jobs, excuse me. So until we control spending, we're not going to create that reassurance necessary to hire people again.
Let me ask you this, because your opponents in the race are asking this question. Carly Fiorino has just posted this question to you. She said, I call once again on Tom Campbell to explain his previous statements and record on the state of Israel, on U.S. aid to Israel, and his associations with sympathizers of radical Islamic movements. What is your response to that?
It's very unfortunate. This is the second rather low kind of attack that she has launched. I think she was very surprised that I jumped ahead of her in the polls. I have a very strong record supporting the military alliance with the state of Israel between the United States. In fact, I voted to go to war when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and was firing Scud missiles into Israel. I actually flew to Israel and visited there in support of their effort and our Patriot missiles there to defend Israel. But the criticism is that I did not support exempting Israel from the cuts in the economic aid when in 1997 we were attempting to balance the budget. Gramm-Rudman was in effect, pay-as-you-go was in effect, and we were cutting spending on the domestic side. We also proposed, the bill proposed, to cut spending on all economic aid and foreign aid as well, except for Egypt and Israel. And I pointed out that since we should continue the military assistance because of the importance of defending Israel against any attack. We ought to treat the economic side the way we'd treat the economic side of any other recipient of aid. And I noted that, in particular, Israel's standard of living was comparable to that of Western Europe. Well, obviously, that was not what some individuals want, but it's quite something else to try to stretch that to say that I'm anti-Israel or even worse, pro-terrorist. That is really despicable.
All right. Well, Congressman, I want to thank you, and to all of you out there. Of course, we will be surveying and talking to other candidates, not only in this race, but in other races across the country as we continue our coverage of this election year. Thanks for watching Washington Unplugged on CBSNews.com. Make sure to tune in Sunday, if you will, for Face the Nation on television. I'm Bob Schieffer. Have a good day.
If we don't expand our imagination,
Justification for being what you are.